Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Season 2 of the ESG Experience podcast brought to you by Gobi, the ESG platform. I'm Helee, Gobi's Chief Revenue Officer.
And I'm Ryan Nelson, Gobi's CEO, and we're your hosts for this podcast.
Whether you're an ESG expert or just dipping your toes into the ESG universe to understand how it can help with engaging stakeholders, mitigating risk, and attracting investors, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll navigate the alphabet soup of ESG, discuss ideas, review strategies, and share industry news and trends. In this episode, we're going to be all about solar energy, and we are very pleased and honored to be joined by Yaniv Kalish, founder and CEO of SolarKal. Yaniv is an experienced climate tech entrepreneur with a demonstrated history of working in renewables and the environmental industry. He built SolarKal from ideation to the largest B2B solar energy marketplace in the US with a passion to increase the adoption of solar energy. He is a solar energy veteran with an MBA focused on energy and entrepreneurship from Columbia Business School. Welcome, Yaniv. We're happy to have you.
Thank you for having me, Helee. Ryan, looking forward to the podcast.
Of course.
Good,
so,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. The awkwardness of Zoom meetings continues well into 2022. I was just going to say the next step is I typically introduce the company, but I always think it's better coming from the mouth of the entrepreneur. So why don't you tell us a bit about your company?
Yeah, so SolarKal, we are, as you mentioned, we are the largest B2B solar energy marketplace in the US. What that means is that we represent real estate owners, businesses, organizations that want to procure solar, and we serve as their procurement team and allow them to streamline the process of transitioning to solar. And we are a marketplace that connects between, again, real estate owners to solar energy providers who compete for their business. Think like an Uber or an Airbnb that connects buyers and sellers. We do the same thing for B2B solar.
I was going to ask you if you're the Amazon of solar, but instead you're the Uber of solar.
The same. We are the lending tree of solar, whatever format you want to use.
What did you put in your pitch deck?
We actually privately funded, so too many pitch decks. We were fortunate enough to be able to go organically, and we got a bunch of grants from New York State, and we've just been happy to serve our clients to date and go organically.
Beautiful.
Yeah, very cool. Really, really like what you're doing, and really appreciate the work and the story as we're researching this. So congrats on the success. It's a very cool thing. Our first question is, why solar? And I'm kind of looking here where you say, I have a passion to increase the adoption of solar energy. So not just, you wanted to do that through a marketplace, but what got you excited about solar, or why is that something you're passionate about? And it seems to go back at least to the 6 or 7 years ago you started this.
So it actually goes further back. My undergrad was in mechanical engineering, and I was an hydraulic engineer, and one of our clients was a solar energy power plant builders in all the technology of CSP, or concentrated solar power. It's a huge mirror, which doesn't exist anymore, but that kind of opened my eye to the solar energy world, because there was a client of ours, and I went into like a huge solar power plant, and I'm like, this is amazing. And the simplicity of generating power to the sun versus everything I learned in my undergrad to burn coal, to turn a turbine, it made so much sense. And since then, I fell in love with the industry. And then I did my master's in business from the idea to learn the financial aspect of the industry. And I worked for a couple of solar companies. Then I kind of had the passion to support organizations, because there's a very high friction between buyers and sellers right now in the B2B space in solar. And that was a big passion of mine, because I realized it's really, really hard to do solar on your building. And that's what prevents the adaptation of solar, at least in the B2B space. And SolarKal is trying to remove that friction through a marketplace approach, and kind of combine my passion for entrepreneurship with my passion for solar. And now everything is kind of in one place in SolarKal.
Very cool.
Yeah, excellent. I appreciate that too. And I've always been a fan. I mean, like you said, just harvesting energy from the sun, it seems like the most natural, common sense way to get energy. It's abundant, it's available. And I think back through my roughly 2 decades in the ESG and sustainability space, and I feel like it, when solar panels first came out, people were like, haha, that's a thing for silly green beans, and they're very expensive and they're ugly. And then you kind of fast forward today, where I feel like it's just about on the cusp of being mainstream. And surely some of that is because the cost of production has come down, it's more accessible. I think, I remember back to when certain states like New Jersey was popular for solar because they had the proper subsidies where people could actually afford to put the panels in, because anyone buying them, the ROI was like 15 or 20 years, it wouldn't pencil out. So I guess, with all that being the history, why is solar gaining so much momentum now? Why does it feel like the time for solar is right now?
So I think what's changed over the years is one, price. Over the last 10 years, the cost of solar panels have dropped 90%. So it just, the equation of scale, adaptation, manufacturing in big factories, the industry is bigger. So the prices really dropped really quickly. The second reason is no one kind of want to be the first one. It used to be kind of a greeny thing. I want to get my house off grid. Now,
right.
The big Fortune 500 are leading the way for years now within Walmart and Target and large REITs. And the middle market sees that the big players are doing it. So they kind of de-risk a lot of the new technology aspect of solar. So I think people feel slightly more comfortable. They see it with their neighbors, they see it with their friends, so they don't feel they're the first ones. With that and kind of adaptation, this like really great flying wheel of the industry, you see regulations that used to prevent solar, and there was a lot of red tape about the permitting process. Those are getting more streamlined. More and more installers are getting into the industry, more money, more financing types. It's now cheaper to finance solar. So this is a really positive loop that's happening over the last 10 years. And I think what I've seen in the last couple of years is, since the pandemic, is a huge ESG push. Like that's something that I never seen before. We used to talk about solar only as a financial product. Everybody cared about the numbers. How much will I save? How much will I make? Now we're seeing this push coming from especially large REITs and real estate groups that have active investors. They're like, what are you doing with sustainability? And they're like, okay, we need to do solar. And they're coming to us and other solar companies of, okay, we have to do solar. We don't know how, which is very different than, kind of 10 years ago when it was an uphill battle to convince organizations to do solar.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And we also, I've been in the ESG space. It used to be called sustainability for about 20 years. And it used to be just that. It just was an off to the side peripheral thing. Now it's mainstream and it's going to push all these other things. And I'd agree. Yeah, the prices and obviously the market's always going to drive the demand.
Yeah, we're joking. I'm going to all this like conferences for solar. And the joke is, 20 years ago, everybody had a ponytail, with short pants. Now it's all like suits and ties and bankers.
That's right.
But it kind of shows you how the product has matured and the offering. And I think I've seen over the last 15 years from, I had to explain to people that you can generate power from the sun, and people were like, "Oh, it's so great for you to help the environment with solar." I think there is a huge energy transition coming in from a technology that was invented 150 years ago to a new technology will just keep getting cheaper. And everything will be solar. I compare it to the internet in the mid 90s, where everyone knew it's about to be big. It's going to have its hypes and lows, but that's where the energy sector is going to.
No, that's so exciting. And I will say, even the most ESG minded folks, and if they're getting the pressure from the investors and whatever it is, it still like has to pencil out. No one is still going to justify a 15-year ROI on something like that. So I think it's just the perfect storm of the prices being palatable and then also the demand and drive for ESG. So that makes sense.
Yeah, such a common story too. I remember the early conferences that we would attend when it was, sustainability for commercial real estate and trying to achieve certifications. Lots of people in Birkenstock sandals, with or without socks, ponytails, just like you mentioned, and that same exact transition. Once the suits are there, and you kind of know that this thing is rolling. So that's always interesting. But yeah, we come from the broad sense of supporting ESG for organizations, and obviously solar can have an awesome impact on the environmental component of hitting some ESG targets. So yeah, again, love to hear the story.
Yeah. I think that's gonna keep creating the momentum. I think that the value will be there. It will keep getting cheaper. I'm also saying that the fossil fuel technologies have basically reached the most efficient way they can get. You see like the huge tractors, supply chains, everything has been perfected for 100 years. So it's not going to get much cheaper, while the renewables is still going down very quickly on the cost curve. So even right now, in most states and in many countries, solar is already cheaper than fossil fuels on an unsubsidized way. And we're still keep getting cheaper, which I think is great. I talked to a colleague of mine who has solar panels on his house, and he's like, he's generating more power than he needs. So he's just keeping the lights on and said, hey, if you have a car in the area, come and charge it in my house because I have a surplus. And I think that's the future we're heading towards, of energy abundance versus the other way of energy shortage. We're seeing what's happening right now in Ukraine. I think the idea of basically placing, like taking 1 or 2% of GDP, investing it in creating a lot of infrastructure for renewables would create energy abundance everywhere, and no one would even talk about it anymore. It would be just free energy everywhere. And I think that's what we're heading towards.
And
Yeah,
so
I saw,
of,
sorry, can I get this one in?
okay.
I saw Elon Musk,
of course, you got to get your boy, you got to plug your boy at any chance you get.
I'm not plugging anybody. Well, I will, but not necessarily my boy. But let me ask this. It was interesting to me when he said, someone said to him, hey, Elon, you said one time that you could easily power all of China with solar. And it was kind of like, it was supposed to put him in a defensive spot. And he just goes, all of a sudden, he's like, oh yeah, no, absolutely, easily. Not even difficult. Plenty of land, not, well, there's so many people. Easily it could be done. How do you feel about that?
So Elon is definitely a unique character. But before I go on a rant on Elon, I think specifically for solar, so obviously the sun doesn't shine at night. So that's an issue that is still in place. It's an intermediate power source, the same as wind. From the solar potential, it is doable. So from the land ratio to China's energy needs, it is available. The question is, how do you solve the intermediacy? And now we're seeing the upbringing of storage and batteries and grid level storage. And I think that once that technology will mature, and I think it's still like a few years behind where it's supposed to be, it's again on this cost curve keep going down, and there's a lot of investment from the venture world, the private equity world. Like solar used to be 6-7 years ago, I think storage would get there. But once you're going to have grid level storage to solve the intermediacy issues, yeah, I don't see a reason why the entire world wouldn't be powered by solar. And I think that goes back also to kind of the centralized versus decentralized power generation. If you have a combination of those two, and in a decentralized way, you have kind of like small microgrids with batteries and renewable sources, and they're always filled, that's where you just have a seamless energy going everywhere with backup from centralized renewable sources. But we still have to solve the cost and the battery solutions.
The battery storage. So you're saying like overnight is still a problem because the sun's not shining all the time, or even in the case of your friend who says he has an abundance, come charge your car. But what else? So I know you can sell energy back to the grid. So like your friend essentially could take that abundance and sell it back to the grid. But is that not as easy as it sounds? Like, could he do that, or he can't actually do that right now?
So that depends on state regulations. Some states you can, some you don't. Him specifically, he has a battery as part of the solar energy system. So he's kind of his own microgrid. So when the sun,
he'll put his energy into the battery.
Yeah. So during the day, he generates more than he needs. So that fills up the battery so he can use it at night. So by his own kind of microgrid, he has an energy abundance. In some states, when you don't install batteries, you can send the power back to the grid that you generate and then use that power at night. The downside is, again, do you create constraints on the grid? Because the grid is not built to have bi-directional power. It was built to have one direction from the generation to the load. But again, now there's a lot of grid upgrades. They're trying to mitigate that. Kind of the vision of the new grid is basically having bi-directional, and the utility is serving more as the funnel of the energy versus the producers of the energy, and basically having a lot of small generation facilities that can transact between themselves. Again, this is not a next year. I would expect that to take a couple of decades, but that's my point. Like my daughters would not see coal power plants. It will be that kind of power dynamics that is still being shaped.
Yeah, let's hope.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful vision. So within the US anyway, is there a particular state, and your focus I know is for businesses, right? Trying to help businesses. Is there a particular state that's got the best incentives or maybe the best capability given, you know, where the sun's shining, or is there a focus somewhere within the US, or is this a lot of businesses are nationwide? So how are you approaching it?
So in the US, it's funny, like 50, you're saying the US, but the US is 50 different markets of solar. Like every state is its own market because it has different regulation. The energy market can be deregulated in some states and regulated in other states. Some utilities have more power than others on regulators in different states. So you'll see some states that are supporting the solar and provide some kind of incentives, and some states literally forbid solar. They
Wow.
tax you if you do solar. So you
wow.
you would think Florida would be a great state for solar, but Florida is actually the opposite. Florida Power and Light, the local utility, has a lot of way on regulation, so it happens slower than it should in the Sunshine State. The Northeast is very receptive for solar. New Jersey is a great state. New York, Massachusetts are great states for solar. The regulatory environment is very streamlined. They have great programs. So those states we're very active in. Illinois recently introduced a new solar program. California is obviously the biggest market, and it's bigger than the 3 or 4 markets, the next markets combined. But now you see the next wave of states, it really see the opportunity of solar in terms of job creation, reducing their energy costs within the state, because lower energy costs, Connecticut or Pennsylvania, even Virginia, Maine, kind of the next frontiers of solar states. That right now are still great for solar, but in the tier 1 states, you'll see like a 3 or 4 year payback. In the tier 2, you might see 6 or 7 year payback.
But you're still better than what we were seeing, a decade ago.
Of course.
But 6 or 7 years still tough to stomach. I was going to ask, I could talk about Florida all day, every day, and this isn't a political podcast, but why would they do that? Why in a state with abundant sunshine? Like, is it truly just a political problem? Like, why wouldn't they want it, allow it? Like, I can't imagine what's the motivation there.
So if you think about a business or a house that puts solar panels for self-consumption on their own house, they're basically providing their own energy. And right now they're buying their energy from the utility.
From FPL.
Yeah, so basically every organization that decides to do a farm to table or electron to whatever you want to call it, FP&L will lose money. They will lose some revenue stream. And if you think about it scale, like it happens in California, that could be a big constraint on them as an organization. So I think for them, they know that it's going to happen, but if it will happen in 20 years and not in 5 years, that's 15 years more revenue for them to generate.
Wow.
So I think that's one of the incentives that I see. A lot of the reasons that the utility are saying, and some of them are actually valid, is again constraint on the grid, because the grid is not built for bidirectional load. So they say, "Oh, give us some time," but you see it happening in other states. So
it can happen.
It can happen, and there is a big debate between the utilities and the consumers around whether or not, if I install solar, is that a benefit? So I pay an additional tax because then basically my neighbor's utility bill subsidize my solar panels. And again, it's a very complicated technical debate I'm not going to get into. But my point is that utilities will use whatever theory that exists that might be true, might not be true, to create a debate, and then basically stall, because every year or two they're stalling. It makes a lot of money for them, basically.
That is interesting. It'll be interesting to see if, which states overcome that. And also to your point that each state is almost operating independently, if there's going to be some sort of, to know the incentives, the ins and outs, especially if you have a footprint of real estate across all the country, it seems like it's just more difficult to implement or to budget or to make a solar plan if every state is completely different. So I imagine that will have to kind of sort itself out a bit.
And I think that's part of the friction that I mentioned before about the challenge of implementing solar at scale, which was part of my passion for starting this company. About someone has to be on the other side. So if you are
Yeah.
a Fortune 50 company, a Walmart, a Target, or whatever that is, you have 3 or 4 people in the company that all they do is solar procurement, understand policy. But the middle market, it's too much of an overtaking for them to figure out how to do so. And we
Totally makes
basically,
sense.
so we're serving as that kind of outsourced Walmart team for the middle market, just to basically streamline the entire process. And it's great. It's a win-win.
Is it that simple where, so say I'm sitting here as a middle market company, I don't have the resources to dedicate to a full-time person that can do the research and the procurement, figure it out. And I say, I want to go solar, and I go to your marketplace, and that's going to help me navigate and figure out and make it an accessible goal for my real estate or my business. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. And I think we do it as to call like a tech enable process. So it's not necessarily you go on the marketplace and like an Amazon on Airbnb right now, where everything's automated, because again, it's very big transactions, it's very complicated, a lot of moving pieces. So we assign an actual project manager. Instead of hiring someone, they're going to have a professional on an outsourced basis, and that person have access to our internal policy teams, technical teams. And I think what's unique about SolarKal, we actually built a platform, an automated platform, when we constantly create bids. So the backend is actual technology, where we have more than 200 solar providers that have profiles to log in, and they can automatically place bids, because we want to remove the friction also for the solar providers. Because if you just services company is different, we want to actually create some efficiency, and we do that for the solar providers to allow them to remotely bid very, very easily, and all those cost savings are being transferred to our clients through lower cost of solar.
Makes sense. Do you go all the way through to installation as well, or just the procurement of the actual materials?
Again, we stay as kind of the procurement rep throughout the process, because a lot of our clients are kind of large real estate groups. So for them, they need help on an ongoing basis. They are buying a new portfolio and want to assess whether or not it's going to be good for solar, or they're building a new building. So kind of how to make the building solar ready. So we're basically serving as that in-house outsourced solar project manager. And we have a lot of project managers in-house that are assigned to different clients.
Makes sense.
That's very interesting. I was just thinking that a star that we call the sun is part of this supply chain and part of this technology. So we've got the sun, the source, which we think has enough power for to serve the entire world. We've got a grid that needs some major upgrading still, I think. We've got, you said we're kind of waiting on battery technology to improve, much like the panel technology has improved. We've got regulation that's helping and sometimes hurting and trying to work it out. And now we've got tech-enabled service providers like yourself to help make sense of all of this and roll it out. So you've got, okay, great, the Fortune 500 are moving, but you've got all, tens of thousands of other businesses that are going to want to do it and use your support. So from like a technology perspective, I think you've covered a lot of the change over the last 10 years. Did I get that right? Is there anything that we're missing? We wait for battery. I mean, we're not waiting for battery. I mean, you can start projects now. It's just look a little bit different than maybe it looks 10 years from now when we've got better batteries.
No, right. I think it's a really good summary of like the different moving pieces that exist right now towards the kind of the future of an abundant renewable energy. And I think things will fall in place. I think what I'm excited about is that we kind of passed the point of no return. Because solar is already cheaper. So it's not like there's a risk of, or what happened tomorrow if they kill subsidies? It doesn't matter anymore. There's no way it's going to happen one way or another. The battery technology might take 10 years and not 5 years, or the solar cost curve might take 4 and not, it doesn't matter, but we're heading to that future regardless. And I think there's a lot of efficiency tools like us that help expedite the process. So right now, solar in the US, I think have over 300,000 people. So it's not each person is an installer that puts panels on the house. It could be financiers, it could be software companies, it could be services companies. So now the industry is big enough to be able to absorb all the different kind of professions, finance, obviously, within the industry, and it's going to keep getting bigger as we kind of install more and more renewable infrastructure in the US and globally, obviously.
Very cool.
I might shift gears a little bit. I always like to hear about people's entrepreneurial journeys. And one of the first questions I ask, what's in the name? Why did you name your company SolarKal?
So when I started the company, the vision again was to kind of simplify solar. I already had a few clients that I simplified solar for through this kind of marketplace approach. And if you go online, kind of easy solar, simple solar, obviously all those domains are busy. And it's really, someone told me you have to have a .com. So all this kind of early ways of naming a company. And then SolarKal, so Kal in Hebrew, I'm from Israel. In Hebrew is easy. So it's like, that was kind of a nice name. And then,
oh yeah, Kal and Kavod. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
and then,
the better half of me is Israeli.
yeah. So the better half of my daughters, I would say it's also, no, I say my wife is also half Israeli, but
It's half.
so Kal is like easy in Hebrew, and then Kal is also the first 3 letters of my last name, but that's besides the point.
Ah, cool.
I had like a small focus group of a few friends and family. Everybody kind of liked the way it rang. I'm like, it's a unique name. So someone told me from an SEO perspective, it's good to have a unique name versus a generic name. So, I think it's not, I wish I could afford, hiring a marketing group to bring me the best names and colors and fonts. But we started off as a very much like a bootstrap company. It was literally a passion for me of, I want to help. I worked in a solar company, and I was very frustrated that when I went to organizations to offer them solar, sometimes the company I worked for wasn't the best solution for them because it was a different state, the project was too big or too small. And it's frustrating because the client could do solar, but it didn't work. So I was like, I wish I was on their side and could recommend them, hey, you should talk to those 3 companies, but obviously you can't. But that kind of created the passion in me that someone should be like on their side of the table. And when I talked to a couple of them, they're like, of course, if someone would help me, I would do solar tomorrow. And they were just waiting for 2 years. And that kind of got me to start the company. And then, someone wanted to hire me. And then, okay, I need a bank account, I need a name for the company. So it was a very bootstrap way in the early days.
That's great. Yeah. We know that story. Fortunately, we've been on a similar journey, and it's very cool. I can tell you that, in my opinion, if we're talking about that, the name doesn't matter, meaning that you're gonna, with authentic work and building your customer base and the content you put out and the experiences you have, it could become the greatest thing. So I totally agree with having something unique that is the primary thing. Whether, I mean, obviously ours was Gobi, so it didn't really mean anything necessarily, but it's so much easier when it's yours and you can pivot and do all that kind of stuff. But that's an awesome story. So you had that experience where there was something to offer these prospects, but the organizations that you were working with couldn't do it. So you wanted to just kind of do it right and get rid of those limitations. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, there are right now, I want to say 4,000 solar providers in the US. And I think and we could talk about it more if you want, about the solar offerings, a lot of different solar products. You can do solar panels, own them for your own needs. You can have a third party own it. You can do remote solar, community solar, a lot of different fancy names and products. And the idea that every out of the 4,000 providers, each company would be great at something. Some are like more local, some are more national, some are good at PPAs, which is a product, some are good at community solar. And when you work for one company, you're pushing only that product or that geography. And I think for me, just trying to bring change in scale, you want to be able to customize solutions for organizations, because if someone were able to do that in a very agnostic way, that would create the trust of the organization in the value of solar. And then it's about just finding the right, micro universe of providers that can compete successfully on that product. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like people understand, and correct me if this thesis is wrong, but people understand marketplaces now. Do your prospects at least understand a marketplace? So when you're saying that you are, a marketplace, that they go, oh, cool, that's very helpful, I understand what that is? Or are you still educating a lot on what it is that you're even offering?
I'm still have to educate, because we're not a true marketplace. We're not like an Uber when it's, everything is on the platform. kind of buyers and sellers, and there's like a, you know, tech developers that just build the software. We are a marketplace we're more like a procurement platform, but we're a marketplace in the sense that we take the projects, put them on a platform, and then others bid for it. So I think we still have to explain how a marketplace suits kind of B2B solar. So we find ourselves having to explain that. I think for organizations that we speak with, we don't necessarily present ourselves as a marketplace. We're more like as an outsourced procurement team. And I think for them, it's easy to understand. And then we say on the back end, we have a marketplace and a platform. But from their perspective, to simplify the value proposition, I think it's easier for them to understand that we are a procurement team. The same as Amazon. I say Amazon, everybody, they're not a retailer, they're a technology company. But they would say they're the biggest retailer out there, but they're a tech company. So it's also like, how do you present yourself to the different stakeholders in your business?
I think, you know, how you said it is right. It's a tech-enabled service. We've kind of seen the same thing in our business with ESG. It just can't be canned into a TurboTax-like or an Amazon-like software. It just needs the hand-holding, but it definitely helps you to be scalable, you know, with the technology. Or I think about my brother who's it's a healthcare marketplace, but it's the same idea as like, you can't necessarily just hop onto a website and procure MRI equipment at scale. You kind of need the human element too, but the technology helps doing what you're doing for solar, or, you know, in some ways what we're doing for ESG. So I think it's it's the way of the world, especially just for more complex businesses that aren't just arbitrary, or, you know, where you're buying commodity.
I mean, for our vision, in the future, it's gonna be more automated. The reason is, again, I say right now, our average transaction is a few $1 million. So right now, I don't see people buy things online without a human for a few $1 million. But if you asked me 10 years ago if anyone would buy shoes online, I would also say that would never happen. So
look at Carvana. Carvana is like the next step of that. Like, even think about buying a car online. Like, that's a huge purchase, but that's happening.
Yeah, going back to Elon, people buying Teslas on just like online, next, and they buy 100,000. Yeah. So you buy a $100,000 product using just, you know, doing next and seeing Elon tweets. So I think the consumer behavior is changing. So we are slowly, and we're adding more and more digitization to our process and our to the company, because we want to kind of grow with the customer's comfort to make large transactions online, and we are automating more and more pieces of our business. So we are in the vision at some point to have everything automated, where you can actually buy that $1 million system fully online.
Yeah, and that would be incredible, and that would, like you said, fully allow your scale, and that can be incredible. But meanwhile, I imagine, I mean, like you said, it's a complex transaction. There's a lot to it. It's a big transaction. It's B2B. So I can imagine people are totally comfortable saying that, oh, you get a project manager and we work with you, and, you know, we consult you and advise you and get you through it. I think, I would imagine that's a great message. I don't think people are saying, oh no, just point me to the portal and I'll figure it out. I'm sure they appreciate the way that you're offering it now, and glad to hear that you're eventually work towards something that can even scale even more. But it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. There's a risk of being ahead of your market. So I think if we build a solution that allows you to buy everything online, I think no one will use it. So you kind of want to grow with what the market needs. And I think for us, the benefit of being able to go organically through our customers and understanding what they want, we have a very close loop on the development cycle, not to go ahead of it. So when we see, as an example, we talked in the beginning of the podcast about right now the big ESG push that we didn't see 2 years ago. So before, we didn't even market to that type of clients because they didn't care about solar. They were like large real estate groups. They didn't care. They didn't have the need to do solar, so they didn't want to. They were just more busy with their investors and like 5 to 7 year funds that they want to cash out on. Now they have to. So now we know that's a big push. So we're kind of growing with that market because it's coming. But if we market to them 5 years ago, that would be not very productive.
Understood. Well, Yaniv, I really appreciate what you're doing, and congratulate you again on the success of SolarKal. As humans of the planet, we thank you for the efforts towards that, very specifically the E part, if not social parts of ESG. So that's awesome. before we let you go, one of the kind of, we had a little humor here and we have a one question challenge that our listeners are very excited to know. So I'm just going to ask you, I'm going to give you a name of a craft in this world of everything is craft and artisan, which I appreciate. I'm going to give you a name of a company, and all you have to do is tell me if it's beans or beer. Beans or beer. Do they make coffee or do they make beer? What is it that they're brewing at this place? It's called Seventh Son.
I would probably go with beans. Something about raising coffee beans with sun. I'm not sure. That would be my guess.
You can't win them all. It is a woman-owned craft beer brewery. Obviously, I picked it because of sun in the name, and that was today's topic. It is in Dunedin, Florida. So I'm going to take an action item. I have a little home here in Florida. I've got people knocking on my door almost every other week trying to get me to go solar, but they must be at odds with FP&L. So I'm going to figure out what's going on down here in Florida and see if I can't help the situation.
Fix it, Ryan. You fix Florida. Just all of it. Not just the solar problem. Just fix the state.
I'll try and fix everything I can while I'm here. I'm going to try and vote and all that. But yeah, Seventh Son, I'm going to try and check it out. I actually haven't been there, but it looks like a cool little brewery in Dunedin and also in Tampa here. But thank you for playing.
Yeah, the microbrewery industry, I'm very grateful for them, for that industry to also blow up. It gives us a lot of options when we go to the bar.
Oh, it's been wonderful. I really, really am glad that is a thing.
Well, great. And that sounds like a wrap for today's episode. Thank you again to our hundreds of thousands of listeners for joining us on the ESG Experience podcast. There's a new episode every month. So if you enjoyed your time with us, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast directory. In our next episode, one of our very own Gobies, Hannah Nelson, will be joining us to discuss the anthropological impact of ESG. We appreciate our loyal subscribers for continuing to listen and learn with us and support our podcast. If you want to continue the conversation between episodes, do follow us on your favorite social media channel at #ESG Experience. Thank you again to our guest Yaniv today, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day, night, morning, evening, wherever you may be.